Greetings fellow Whovians, welcome to Timey Wimey Review. What happens when two mythical legends come together? Well, today we're going to find out when the Doctor meets the legendary Robin Hood in the 12th Doctor episode Robot of Sherwood, originally broadcast on BBC One in September 2014. Just in case you don't know the plot, Clara requests the Doctor to take her to the 12th century Sherwood forest to meet Robin Hood. The Doctor agrees to take her on the pretense of proving Clara wrong about the existence of this legendary hero. However, to the Doctor's dismay, he does exist, along with his merry men, the Sheriff of Nottingham, and robots disguised as medieval knights who are plundering the city of its gold to power their spaceship. I'll start off with the production values because really it does look very good. This episode does look quite a glossy, polished article. I've always been praising the BBC in terms of how well they can do period costumes and drama, especially particularly their costumes, because they do look fantastic. And also the location work here and then the castle does look really good, especially with the location shooting as well. Cynically, you can also argue that obviously the BBC can do this quite well, particularly in the style of Robin Hood, because they did have a series of Robin Hood not too far removed from when Doctor Who was first broadcast and filming. I think they were still doing a series of Robin Hood at the time. So this can cynically could look like, well, we've got these stuff, we've got the costumes, let's just use Doctor Who and save ourselves a bit of money. So you can see that on one side. But on the other side of that, in terms of the production values, the explosions look fantastic, particularly when the Doctor uses a sonic screwdriver to blow up the target board, and particularly the explosions when they were battling the medieval robotic knights. And speaking about those robotic knights, again, they looked really good. I liked that they're sort of looking like these medieval knights, and then they just open up their helmets to reveal the robot inside with these lasers coming out of their forehead. It's just simple but effective, and I really like the voice of those robots as well. However, on the flip side, these robots are not really overly explained in this episode. They are basically there to plunder the city of its gold so they can power up the spaceship and head to the Promised Land, which was pretty much this overall story arc for this season of Doctor Who. Everyone has a story arc. We've had like Torchwood in the past. This one was kind of maybe a little bit heavy-handed from what I can remember. And why these robots are going to the Promised Land. I do like these robots, and I think these should have been used again in Doctor Who, but maybe have a bit more of a backstory of where they come from and who they actually are. I did like Ben Miller's portrayal as the Sheriff of Nottingham, the evil Sheriff of Nottingham. And it was like a very basic sort of evil villain Sheriff of Nottingham, nothing too sort of out there. But what I really liked was I felt that Ben Miller, especially the look, he kind of looked like Anthony Ainley version of the Master. And obviously we've had David Bradley make an appearance, multiple appearance as the First Doctor. Well, we could easily do that with Ben Miller as the Master. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my thoughts on that. Equally, it gets a very good performance from Tom Riley as Robin Hood, albeit a very over-the-top performance with all the laughing and ha-ha-ha, which I always think Errol Flynn is like when I always see a poster of that 1940s version of Robin Hood. But it all made sense in this episode of why he's a bit like that. You know, he is putting on a bit of a brave face, particularly when he's talking to Clara. You know, Clara sort of sees it in his eyes, or, you know, very briefly. And also the sparring that he has with the Doctor, getting on the Doctor's nerves, but has a really nice touching moment towards the end of the episode where they're talking about their own existence. And you know, it's always good to basically, you know, the Robin Hood basically found comfort that after so many centuries, he is just a legend rather than being recognised as a real person. because obviously that kind of gives hope for people to aspire to, standing up and saying no and fighting the good fight like the Doctor does throughout all of his lives. And it was that nice little mirroring of there is a little bit of Robin Hood in the Doctor and vice versa. So Peter Capaldi spars very well with Tom Riley's Robin Hood, and I do like I've just mentioned, the sparring between these two characters. My sort of nitpick really is the sword and the spoon fight. It doesn't quite do it for me. It certainly ain't knifey spoonsies. But yeah, it just, I don't know. I feel like with this sort of 12th Doctor era, there was a little bit of, I kind of feel like he's a bit of a midlife crisis Doctor, especially in the following season where he rides in with a tank, with the guitar and the sonic specs, the sonic sunglasses, I should say. And again, I know there's quite a lot of Whovians out there that absolutely love that, and all power to you. But for me personally, I just don't see it. It just doesn't really do out for me. Again, with the back to the sword fighting with the spoons. We've seen the 5th Doctor fight Sir Guy, aka the Master, in The King's Demons. So, and that was a really good sword fight. And obviously we've seen the 10th Doctor doing sword fighting before. Imagine the 5th Doctor fighting Sir Guy with a spoon back in the 80s. It would have got absolutely panned. I think they got away with it now in this episode, but for me personally, I didn't like that. I'd rather just hit each other with the sticks and stuff over the bridge. That would have been a bit more plausible for me. I do appreciate that they kind of threw in this this Doctor's identity crisis of, am I a good man, into this with the Doctor and Robin Hood sparring and having that heart-to-heart at the end. But I like the more sparring part of it, particularly with the Doctor just trying to prove that Robin Hood and the rest of the Merry Men doesn't exist, trying really hard and sort of like, if anything, trying to tarnish that legacy, whilst obviously, it's mirror imaging the legacy that they both leave behind. It's particularly that moment where the Doctor finds that database on the robot ship and finding all the other various sort of forms of mythology surrounding Robin Hood, particularly that blink and you miss it shot of Patrick Troughton as Robin Hood from the mini drama that was back in 1950s BBC. That was a pretty cool moment to see. Also with those little snarky comments that the Doctor makes that we've seen in the first 3 episodes of this series. Obviously honing in, or at least the writers probably honing in on the Malcolm Tucker persona that Peter Capaldi did so well in the thick of it, and obviously delivering that here. I do feel that some of it does get lost in the presentation. It is pretty much if you don't listen to it, you don't hear it, you do miss it quite more often than not. And I'm not sure that was more of a directorial choice, or just maybe just the way Peter Capaldi delivered those lines. I'm not quite sure, but I do appreciate it. They are, they are fun. I think this episode really would benefit if it was maybe a little bit later in the series. Maybe if it was episode 5 or episode 6 instead of episode 3. I think this episode would be more appreciated. Still having those sort of snarky comments, and then seeing this more softer side of the 12th Doctor. I wasn't overly a massive fan of the bickering between the Doctor and Robin when they were all locked up in the cell with Clara, but I do appreciate that it gave Clara a bit more to do, because I do feel she was a little bit lost in this episode. She was just basically there to meet her hero, and sort of like, that weird sort of you should never meet your heroes type of moments. But really, they did sort of bring her into it by telling the Doctor and Robin to shut up and asking for the plan. And I did like that moment where the guards do come and take Clara because they think, well, clearly she's the leader because she's telling these two to shut up, where really maybe not so. So I appreciate that. I think Jenna Coleman did a really good performance with the material that she was given. Again, I know Clara as a character got a bit too much in the world of Doctor Who, but here I thought she was pretty more grounded, and I felt that the relationship between the Doctor and Clara, or particularly the 12th Doctor and Clara, was quite well put together. Again, going back to maybe this episode should have been a couple of episodes later on in the series, because I did like that sort of that bickering, and not bickering, but that sort of yin and yang that they had together. It did remind me of the 6th Doctor and Perry, just a bit more polished, where 6th Doctor and Perry was always bickering, and it didn't quite transfer quite well to a TV audience, where I felt the 12th Doctor and Clara's relationship and that sort of yin and yang relationship worked better here. I'm going to give Robots of Sherwood a TARDIS rating of 7 out of 10. More of a soft 7 out of 10 on this one, but again, I just had a fun time with this episode. I know it's not to everyone's taste, and I totally appreciate that, but it is just a fun, quirky one-off story. Mark Gatiss wrote this episode, and that's what I kind of appreciate with his Doctor Who episodes. They're not the most, probably not the most strongest if you wanting more sort of like story-driven sci-fi full-on Doctor Who. But I do appreciate that he tries to bring something fun into Doctor Who, something that's a little bit ridiculous, but at the same time could be a little bit plausible, a bit like with Victory of the Daleks and the Spitfires in space. I feel that the Doctor meeting a mythical legend is a little bit plausible, that he does exist, and I do appreciate actually that the referencing of the mini scoop, which was first mentioned in Carnival of Monsters. I like that little touch as well. Yeah, it's not the most polished of stories, but it is just a fun, quirky story. And like I said, it would have been, I felt this story or this episode would have been more appreciated if it was just a few more episodes further into the season, rather than being in the 3rd episode of that series. Let me know in the comments below your thoughts to Robots of Sherwood. Are you a big fan of these quirky Doctor Who type episodes or stories? And if so, what is your favourite or quirkiest Doctor Who story or episode that you can think of? Thank you very much for watching as always. I hope you've enjoyed this review. Please like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the cloister bell for more notifications, come say hello and follow me on Twitter at ReviewTimey, and do check out my other fantastic Doctor Who content on the Timey Wimey Review TikTok page and right here on the Timey Wimey Review YouTube channel. And as the good doctor once said, can you just stop? You'll give yourself a hernia.